standard Ontario 18-inch sawback machete. There's a cheap Chinese-made machete, I like the sort of bolo design of it. It's from Smoky Mountain Knife Works, probably a couple decades ago, maybe more. There's the Cold Steel Trailhawk, seen quite a bit of use in tossing, which isn't super refined on it. Come to nearly as narrow a geometry as some of these other tools, but it does give you a lot of length on the swing. Fun to throw too. This is an old Husqvarna branded hatchet. These were actually made by Wetterlings and of competitors, a much less expensive and just as high a quality hatchet as the Grand Force Brooks. A very compact tool, very easy to carry, very comfortable in hand, easy to swing, very lightweight, easy to do some carving with. Obviously the geometry on it is for chopping and splitting, not for penetrating that deep into the wood, but for splitting and kindling. Next up is this Himalayan Imports Villager kukri. You can see that this thing is a 1/2 inch thick, but it actually comes to pretty decent geometry there on the apex. Let's see if we can get it to zoom in there. But this is very much like a hatchet, good for splitting up lumber. Pounding it through with baton makes a good throw. I'm not a big fan of this handle because it is just so round. It does twist out of your hand, and then the pommel here, because it flares out on both sides, that really can dig into the back of your hand a lot. The forward one does help with retention, but this backward one is just a pain when you're chopping. It becomes very annoying to chop with after not too long a period of time. For most chopping purposes, you're actually going to grab lower down, which again puts this thing right into your hand, which is very uncomfortable. This is the Scrapyard Knife Works Chop House. This is a nice small tool for chopping. How thick the spine is, so it also makes for a very good throw. You won't split it as readily because the geometry is much narrower than the hatchet or the tomahawk. Give that a little bit better image there, or the kukri, but otherwise a great small chopping knife. GSO-10, I did put liners. It's just a rubber tire. A much thinner spine does not make as good of a throw. It's a great chopping knife. This handle doesn't flare out much there. It's fairly flat and then only has a slight widening laterally here as you come down into the palm. Most of what is provided with regard to tension is the way the spine curves very long there, and the way your fingers can reach into these different grooves. Normally I would have thought finger grooves wouldn't be very good, but these are actually quite effective, and I have not had any problems with it holding it in any of these grips. If you do want to turn it around, you barely feel them because they're not that pronounced. Light bit of pommel flare, but it's very subtle, so it doesn't dig into your hand at all, and it just provides the littlest amount of extra retention there on the spine when you're holding it back here for a chopping stroke. Looking forward to the new GSO-10. GSO-12. Design has gone through a couple of different changes. Most noticeably to me is the very, very pointy tip. Tip fits into the tip of the GSO-10. It's very, very stabby for such a knife. It's got a very thick spine on it. The spine is well cut, so you can use this to scrape a ferro rod, but it also makes it a little bit less comfortable with bare hands if you're trying to choke up. Not that I recommend doing that, although it's actually narrower in the neck there, right at the choil, than the GSO-10. The handle, in strong contrast to the GSO-10, you can see it has a lot of change and a very pronounced forward guard here laterally. And this flare really will dig into your hand if you're trying to grip it like this, especially this back portion right here. It's used in the sheath for positive retention, and so I don't want to adjust it to get rid of it, but it's definitely one thing that I think is in the way. Without any finger grooves in there, you can obviously spin this around easily, and you can also try to hold it in different ways. However, the lateral geometry of this handle, because it tapers very narrow here in the index area and then widens into this baseball in the center palm, and then tapers again and widens out again near the pommel. It does sort of tell your hand where it needs to be held. I personally don't actually like holding it like this very much. I tend to have my index finger slide down right over the top of this baseball, just like with the Rodent 9 for chopping, which does position your thumb over the top of the baseball there and puts your lower fingers down right up against the lower portion of the handle where it flares out again, and does provide excellent retention. You certainly can use a forward lanyard on this if you'd like, to give you extra safety as well as leverage for doing a chop. I love the way this handle curves, which is really nice. You can see where the sweet spot is there for chopping, and that there's a bit of a recurve to the blade. And the geometry on this is actually pretty thin. You can see it. Because it widens out to such a thick spine, it certainly does work as a fro. So there you go. This is red oak. Just to give a demonstration of how pointy this tip is, I'm just going to do a little bit of drilling on this piece of oak that I just split open. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the tip in, and then just rotate around like this. Just like a drill bit. Obviously, very slow drill bit. And give you an image of what that did and how quickly. So you can see that went pretty deep in there, really fast, and that narrow tip just gets really down in there. Alright, so the GSO-12 is designed with a forward lanyard hole that allows you to string a cord through it. You can actually lace this underneath here with a little bit of a twist tie, and then pull it through so that you'll have something similar to just having, you know, this looped around the back end here. The way that forward lanyard loops typically work is you get your hand in there, you make one twist or two twists, whatever you need, that will put the lanyard in line with the spine. And this will aid in sheathing as well, because it will allow you to sheathe, keeping that lanyard in line with the cutout that was designed for it. And what that does is you can see that the knife then will hang very nicely, be easy to swing back into hand, and then you can not have as much tension as it will just stay there very easily. Let's see what happens. That was pretty easy. Let's do it again. I had typically been a natural canvas micarta guy. Now, I used to consider the GSO 5.1 as being a relatively large knife. You can see how it fits in my hand there. I can get a good grip on it, swing back for some very lightweight chopping, pull forward on it to get a good grip for doing some carving and more detail work. So this is what I thought of as being a large knife. And then I got the GSO-12. After using this, I then picked up the 5.1 that made the 5.1 feel tiny. It is quite the tool. So just giving you a sort of size comparison of those knives, and of course your buck 110. I'm not actually sure if this is micro textured. It's actually much smoother. It does not feel micro textured, but maybe their texturing process has gotten much smoother over time. Let's talk a little bit about the sheath system. So the sheath itself has very positive retention, of course, on the knife. This belt clip attachment, its carry height on the sheath places the pommel of the knife approximately 3 5/8 inches above the belt line. So if you check where your belt line is and measure, a little over 3.5 inches up, that's where you're going to be getting stabbed by the pommel if you bend or twist or anything like that. The belt loop itself is about 1.5 inches wide, and it can fit a 2-inch belt with a little bit of wiggle room, plenty of thickness there to accommodate. It stays on very securely. You can slide it around your belt though, if your belt isn't quite that thick. The hole spacing on it does not fit with other accessories, unlike my UKE. 7/8 of an inch on center, so you won't be able to use that with the tech lock. This won't fit on there. What you can do is use a Dremel attachment. These are actually the perfect size for this, and you can just go in, find the hole, and cut yourself a little over this way and cut yourself a little over that way on the holes of the kydex, and then you'll be able to attach a tech lock or anything like that if you like to the opposite side. And that's what I'd recommend if you don't want to use this belt clip. The belt clip does work clipping onto a pocket or something like that, which does put it low enough that you're not getting jabbed in the side by the pommel all the time. It's very strong, very sturdy, and you can see that it fits flush against itself the way it's folded there. If you want to do dangler style and still want to use this attachment, is just take a little bit of cord. This isn't paracord, but is another nylon string, and put a couple knots on it, and these will also fit through the holes on a tech lock. And then you can just have that clip underneath. One thing to note is that if you do hang like this, what you'll find is that it does still drag away from the body a bit. You can see the angle of the knife there. And I'll back out and do a little wider shot so you can see that it does hang away. My UKE holds the knife much straighter. You can take this off of here and connect it directly to the holes on and slots on the kydex sheath. You'll want to add another sort of clip lower down. If you only have one sort of at the balance point here, the knife's going to wobble a lot when you hang it on your back if you're trying to do scout carry or horizontal carry. The sheath eyelets are 1 13/16 on either side of the sheath. Let's see here. So these suckers here, 1 13/16 apart. The first two are 5/8 of an inch on center, just so you know that. And there's these 1-inch slots that are cut between the eyelets. So there should be plenty of spacing there for you to have different options for mounting things using the slots. Put some sort of plastic washer or a spacer on this side so that even though these pan-headed screws, it's nice that they're very wide like this, they can make an indentation in here if you screw them too tight. So you might want to just something broader across there if you don't want to mar your kydex. Or just don't worry about it and you're good to go. If you tighten these down too much, you will notice that the tension on the sheath for both sheathing and unsheathing will change. The knife will drag more along the sheath if you over tighten those screws. If you want them to be like that, that's also an option.